But actually go on H-1B visas and what the cap should be, etc. So President Obama, and yeah, thank you. President Obama very much wanted to liberalize the immigration. Yeah.
What is CLR?
Yeah. Comprehensive immigration reform. Sorry. Yeah, comprehensive immigration reform bill, a very, I have on a different side, I call it the elusive comprehensive immigration reform bill. Everybody wants one, but it never seems to happen. Instead, politics ends up focusing on piecemeal kinds of reforms, such as the big making it legal or making it illegal for the DACA policy. So you might know what the DACA policy is. That's delayed action on childhood arrivals. So people who were brought over as children into the United States, and what they had to say about that are not subject to the same kind of restrictions as people who came under. So, as I was saying, President Obama was trying to push through a liberalized immigration bill. Very ironically, in his efforts not to look too soft on immigration, he ended up being known as the deporter-in-chief. The reason they called him that was because he had a crackdown on immigration coming across the border and deporting people who were coming across the border, because in trying to get a coalition together to pass an immigration bill, he needed to bring on board Republicans who thought that he was being too soft on immigration. So on one hand, he was going to be tough on immigration by strengthening the border, and on the other hand, he wanted to liberalize rulings for people to be able to come to the United States. So his goal was to expand family reunification, and he had this, I think this is a great policy, he wanted automatic green cards for people graduating from the universities in the United States in STEM fields. And so his proposal was a green card should be stable to diplomas. It should be nice to get a diploma with a green card stable to it. And working for an easier path to citizenship, etc. So he wanted to make it easier for skilled immigrants to come. So in 2013, his bill encouraged raising the cap on H-1B visas, but greater scrutiny on those people who were getting the visas, and also greater scrutiny on the companies that were hiring them and what wages they were paying them. Because one of the concerns about this highly skilled immigration then and today is that there's a concern that people coming from India or other countries working in the United States in highly skilled capacities in the tech field might be being paid less, and that would depress wages. And so the concern was bringing people over would depress wages and not protect the jobs of the already American workers who are already doing those jobs. And there's been several studies on whether or not that actually happens, whether it depresses wages to have people coming in and working these jobs, some of them contract jobs. But the studies aren't conclusive. Some say that in fact it does depress wages, others say in fact it doesn't. But that was the concern. And so in introducing these restrictions is when the conversation started up between President Obama and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who expressed to President Obama that the concern from India was that if you start making H-1B too stringent and the regulations too stringent, that this will be a bad public relations look for the United States. It might discourage people, Indian workers, to whether they might want to come to the United States. It might discourage professors to encourage them to go to the United States. So the argument was that this was not, that India was very much against this kind of scrutiny on H-1B. So Obama promised that he would take this issue into account. And as you say, it became a source of negotiation between India and the United States, rather than the United States just saying this is what we're going to do. But it was a source of discussion. Ultimately, the bill, and you might have guessed ahead here, ultimately the bill was blocked by a Republican-controlled Congress, which is an example of the challenges of guiding a comprehensive immigration bill through the system. Because U.S. immigration policy remains a complex interplay of what seems political expediency, executive choice, and I'm going to talk about that later, the difference between Biden and Trump's choices on immigration, which very dramatic change that we've seen. Congressional decision, court rulings, interest rate pressures, temper of the times, there's all these things that both can block immigration reform from happening, which of course, as I mentioned, immigration reform will help facilitate legal immigration. The second vignette is more contemporary. I want to talk about, we know about the personal bond meet between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi since Trump's first administration. Looks like those two have a good working relationship and been able to evolve some very positive things at the last meeting, for example, between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, had some good, very good strategic outcomes from that. It's also evident that President Trump is moving away from the old way of looking at international relations and kind of restructuring what the international system would look like. So he's moving away from multinational kinds of institutions, which of course was something that Biden really played up in multinational type institutions, and moving towards more bilateral relationships. So having one-on-one relationships with different countries that you can work with rather than trying to work through multinational organizations that have really been the form since World War II, when those Women's Forums were initially set up. Prime Minister Modi, as we all know, was one of the first to come to the United States and have a one-on-one meeting with Trump, and did a very good job of representing India as a country that was ready to do business with the United States, building on that formal relationship that they'd already established. And he was very widely praised for this. The Ashton Tells refers to this as Modi makes magic, and refers to Modi as having been able to disarm Trump's normally bristly self by working alone at that way for Modi makes magic. And C. Raja Mohan wrote in Foreign Policy that India is in what he called it's in a sweet spot. And what he meant was that in the change of his international relations, that Modi and India, is able to position itself in such a way as to take advantage of this new strategic environment. The swift turn away from Europe more towards Asia, the normalizing of relations with Russia takes some of the pressure off India, because India has continued to have relationships with Russia. So that some of the changes in international relations is going to be very favorable to India on the world stage. So without taking away from the successful agreements that they made in their meetings, it's all over the news, and it's already been referred to, is President Trump's mass deportations. And of course, these don't just affect India, but they certainly do affect India. And in fact, in some ways, in a kind of magnified way, because there were some groups of immigrants that were deported without being put into military planes and shackled. So there's a question of why exactly that happened. But President Trump clearly sees himself as fulfilling a campaign pledge by doing this, something he promised during his campaign. Perhaps he's intending that as a deterrent. The less pleasant being deported is, the more likely people are going to be, or less likely people are going to be to try to come across the border. India is being very diplomatic in its response, and argues that people who are not authorized don't have the right to be in a country where they're not authorized, is willing to take back as long as people can prove that they're Indian citizens. Happy to take these people back. We've heard very little about what rehabilitating these people would look like. I think maybe someone's planning on speaking to that, but I've heard very little about what that rehabilitation might look like. But there's all kinds of humanitarian and UN issues here that we can talk about and refer to. India has been very active, fairly recently, just in the paper yesterday. She said we saw that. Interviewing the people who have been returned, finding out exactly who the agents were that facilitated this trip, and trying to crack down on those people, and those people more widely that guide these people on these long torturous trips, taking all their money, and in many cases, particularly now, they got arrested as soon as they landed in the United States, so they went, impoverish their families and possibly themselves for not, because they were immediately returned. So it is a little bit of a contrast, because I'm not sure how we think about that, but just the very friendly relationships that India and the United States have manifests itself in a very public action that I think most of us would condemn. This is a graph here of the graph of immigration to the United States from India, just showing the rapid increase that's taken place in the last few years. So in talking about the centrality of India, the diaspora, and the vignettes, I want to just touch on the Indian diaspora and how politically, socially, and economically influential it is. not news to anyone else, I'm not sure. But is a link between the two countries, and it's very much impacted by immigration policy, and actually is involved in speaking out about American policy as well. So just to highlight how central and significant the Indian diaspora is, can you go forward here? Or back? No, can you go forward and then forward again? There's what I want. That is thank you. Yes. I say I'm not. So the Indian American community in the U.S. has grown from 1.9 million in 2000 to 5 million in 2023. So extremely rapid growth of immigration. The last